You open your eyes. Before your feet even touch the floor, your hand is already reaching for your phone. There's an email from your boss, sitting there like a small landmine. A headline about something terrible happening somewhere in the world. And then, almost cruelly, a post from someone you know announcing a win you haven't had yet. 3 minutes. That's all it takes. 3 minutes. And your nervous system is already in a low-grade state of alarm, even though the actual day hasn't started yet. Here's the strange part. The people who seem the most mentally strong, the ones who stay calm when everything falls apart, the ones who bounce back from setbacks that would flatten most of us, they go through the exact same mornings. They get the bad emails too. They get rejected. They feel the same spike of anxiety you just felt reading that sentence. So what's actually different about them? It's not that they have fewer problems. It's not that they were born with some kind of emotional armor the rest of us missed out on. What's different is that, somewhere along the way, they trained their brain to respond differently. And that word, trained, is the whole point of this video. Your brain, if we're being honest about it, was never built to make you happy. It was built to keep you alive. That's its actual job description, which means it's constantly scanning for danger, constantly steering you toward comfort, constantly trying to help you avoid pain, even the emotional kind. That's why it's so much easier to spiral into stress than to settle into calm. Calm isn't the brain's default setting, survival is. But here's the good news, and it's not just a motivational line, it's backed by real neuroscience. The brain has something called neuroplasticity, which basically means it can rewire itself based on repeated experience. Mental resilience isn't a personality trait you either have or don't have. It's closer to a muscle, and like any muscle, it responds to training. In this video, we're going to walk through 5 daily habits that mentally strong people tend to build into their lives, almost without making a big deal out of it. This isn't a list of motivational quotes. It's not just think positive. These are small, specific behaviors backed by behavioral psychology that actually change how your brain reacts to pressure over time. But before we get to habit number 1, there's something most people get completely wrong about mental toughness. They assume it means never feeling fear, never feeling doubt, walking through life like nothing can touch you. That's not it at all. Mentally strong people feel fear just as often as anyone else. The difference is, they've learned not to let that fear make the final decision. And that pattern, more often than not, starts the moment they wake up. If your mornings start with email, you're letting someone else decide your emotional state before you've even decided it yourself. If they start with social media, an algorithm is making that decision for you, and it's not exactly optimizing for your peace of mind. Research into dopamine and attention shows just how easily the brain gets hijacked by strong stimuli right after waking up. It's not that dopamine is the villain here. The real issue is that your brain hasn't had a chance to regulate itself before it gets hit with 100 competing signals demanding a reaction. There's also something called the cortisol awakening response, a natural spike in stress hormone that happens shortly after you wake up. It's normal. It's supposed to help you get moving. But when you pair that spike with a flood of bad news and comparison, you're basically pouring gasoline on a fire that was already lit. Morning sunlight, on the other hand, helps regulate your circadian rhythm and can support a healthier stress response over the course of the day. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but simple isn't the same as ineffective. So what does this look like in practice? Mentally strong people tend to protect the first 60 minutes of their day. No social media, no email. Instead, some natural light, a glass of water, a short walk, or just a few minutes of intentional breathing. Have you ever noticed how different your whole day feels depending on how those first 60 minutes go? But protecting your peace isn't the whole picture. If you want to get stronger, at some point, you have to deliberately choose discomfort. Think about this for a second. Every single time you avoid something difficult, your brain quietly logs a lesson. Avoidance equals relief. And every time you face something difficult instead, your brain learns the opposite lesson, that discomfort can be survived, even mastered. This connects to something researchers call stress inoculation, and it borrows its logic from something you already understand: vaccines. A small, controlled dose of something difficult can actually make you more capable of handling something much bigger later on. It's the same underlying principle as hormesis, where a manageable amount of stress triggers adaptation rather than damage. This isn't only about cold showers, even though that's usually the example people jump to. It's difficult conversations you've been putting off. It's public speaking. It's waking up earlier than you'd like. It's a hard workout. It's sitting with a skill you're bad at instead of quitting the moment it gets uncomfortable. You've probably heard of David Goggins, the ultramarathon runner known for pushing his body to extremes most people would never attempt. You don't need to live like him. That's not the takeaway here. What matters is the underlying skill he built, the ability to tolerate discomfort on purpose, in small, repeated doses. So here's a simple rule worth trying. Every day, do one thing your future self will thank you for, even if your present self absolutely hates it in the moment. Here's where it gets interesting, though. The event itself doesn't actually determine how your life unfolds. The meaning you assign to that event does. This is where cognitive reframing comes in, one of the core ideas behind cognitive behavioral therapy. It's closely tied to what's often called a growth mindset. And let's clear up a common myth right now. Mental toughness does not mean pretending everything is fine when it isn't. That's not strength. That's suppression. And suppression tends to backfire. Picture two people who both lose their jobs on the same day, for the same reason. One of them thinks, "My life is over." The other thinks, "This really hurts, but maybe this is the push I actually needed." Same event, completely different meaning attached to it. And over the following months, their two lives will likely start to look very different, not because one of them was luckier, but because one of them interpreted the setback in a way that opened doors instead of closing them. A simple exercise that supports this kind of reframing is a short nightly reflection. What went well today? What did today teach me? What's still within my control? Research on gratitude practices and journaling suggests they can meaningfully reduce stress and improve emotional regulation over time. Effects vary from person to person, of course, but the pattern shows up again and again in the research. But even the right mindset won't save you if you let other people constantly drain your energy. Most people don't burn out because they work too much. That's actually a common misunderstanding. They burn out because they never truly rest. There's a difference between being physically off the clock and being mentally, actually, off. Psychologists talk about something called decision fatigue, the idea that your capacity for good decisions wears down over the course of a day, the same way a muscle gets tired from repeated use. There's also a tension residue, where part of your mind stays stuck on a previous task even after you've moved on to something else. Add in the pressure to always be available, always online, always replying, always checking, and it's no surprise so many people feel exhausted by 3 p.m. There's a quote worth remembering here. No is a complete sentence. You don't need to justify a boundary with 3 paragraphs of explanation. A simple shutdown routine can make a real difference. Close the laptop, turn off notifications. Let tomorrow's email wait until tomorrow. Does this sound impossible in your line of work? For a lot of people it does, at first. But even small boundaries, tested consistently, tend to expand over time. But even boundaries won't fully protect you if your brain never actually gets to recover, because recovery isn't separate from the training. It's part of it. There's a common myth that resilience means never stopping, never slowing down, always pushing forward. The reality looks almost the opposite. High performers, the ones who sustain their edge over years rather than burning out in a few, recover strategically and intentionally. Sleep plays a bigger role here than most people give it credit for. It's when your brain consolidates memory, processes emotional experiences, and allows the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for rational thought and impulse control, to essentially restore itself. Picture two people, one who slept 5 hours, one who slept 8. The next day isn't just about energy levels. Their ability to stay calm under pressure, to think clearly, to regulate their emotions, is measurably different too. A simple wind-down routine helps here. A paper book instead of a screen, A cooler room, blue light off an hour or so before bed. Roughly the same bedtime, night after night, so your body can build a rhythm it can rely on. There's one more habit though, and it's the one people talk about the least, even though it might matter more than almost anything else on this list. You are not only the product of your willpower, you're also the product of your environment. The people you talk to, the content you consume, the space you spend your time in. If the people around you complain constantly, your brain quietly absorbs that as normal. If the people around you tend to solve problems instead of dwelling on them, your brain absorbs that pattern too. Jim Rohn put it simply, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Does that idea feel true to you? Or does it feel a little too tidy? Either way, it's worth sitting with for a moment. So here's the thing that stands out most. After looking closely at people who handle pressure well, they're not actually stronger than the rest of us in some fundamental way. They just built better systems. They don't sit around waiting for motivation to show up before they act. They built habits that make the right choice the default choice, so willpower barely has to enter the equation. That's really what mental strength is. Not some dramatic moment of heroism. It's built quietly, in hundreds of small decisions, repeated day after day, most of them so ordinary you'd barely notice them happening. So here's a challenge, and I'd genuinely like to hear how it goes for you. Don't try to install all 5 habits tomorrow morning. That's a setup for failure. Instead, pick exactly one. Commit to it for 7 days. Then come back to this video and tell me what actually changed. If this resonated with you, hit like. It genuinely helps this video reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribe if you want more videos like this one. Share it with someone who's going through a hard season right now. And save this video, because chances are you'll want to come back to it more than once. Which one of these 5 habits do you think you're missing the most right now? Let me know in the comments. I actually read them.